Hi, this is Joyce Smith. You're listening to the Northern Report.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to the Northern Report. I'm your host, Sean Burns, and I'm coming right at you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Here on the Northern Report, I aim to shine a light on emerging and existing Canadian talent, as well as some of the legends we're still lucky to have with us. My guest on today's show is Joyce Smith. Joyce was among Canada's very first female country stars. She performed as a teenager on radio and television shows aired out of Edmonton, Alberta, and in her late teens joined on as part of the Rogers Brothers group, touring throughout Western Canada and opening shows for many of Nashville's top touring artists of the day. Following a run with Webb Pierce, Joyce was invited to Nashville, where she recorded a session under the direction of the legendary Owen Bradley and backed by some of Earth's finest ever musicians. One of the songs from that session was Leavin' on Your Mind. It became an immediate radio hit in the United States, selling in excess of 100,000 copies, and earned Joyce a CMA nomination for Most Promising New Female Vocalist. It was shortly thereafter that Owen Bradley recorded the same song with Patsy Cline. Cline's version was among the last songs recorded prior to her tragic death in 1963. Landing down in Fort Worth, Texas, Joyce secured a slot as a regular performer at the famed Panther Hall. It was there she met Bob Wills and would go on to sing with Bob and the Texas Playboys at Panther Hall and a number of syndicated radio programs. After returning to Alberta to raise a family, Joyce remained active, performing and recording, cementing herself among the top of the heap for Western Canadian country music artists over several decades. After her time at Decca Records, Joyce went on to record albums for The Point, Broadland, and royalty labels, charting several singles in the process. Joyce has been inducted into the Alberta Country Music Hall of Fame and has been presented with the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Alberta Women of Country Music organization. In 2010, Joyce Smith was inducted into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame. Folks, I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with the legendary Joyce Smith. Just like to talk to you about country music.
Okay.
Which is appears to be your specialty.
Well, it's what I've done all my life, I guess.
If we could get started kind of early on in the beginning, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I grew up mostly around Edmonton, I guess you might say.
What was Edmonton like back then? Because it's a pretty big city now.
Oh, it's huge now, but back then it was a small city. It was great. I liked it then better, I think.
Still had like a rural feel, even though it was one of the bigger centers in the province?
Yeah.
So was there much music being played around your house in those days, records or radio?
Well, yeah, we played country radio all the time. You know, my parents liked country music, so we listened to country music all the time. And I was maybe about 13, 14 years old. I was singing at home, and there was a local radio program on one of the stations here, and they had a hall, so they had a live audience, and they would have, a show every Thursday, I think it was, on the radio, and we'd go over there and audition on the Wednesday and Thursday. If we were okay, they'd put us on the radio on Thursday. So
wow, so it just worked like that. Like it was the regional, local acts, and you were
very local.
You were able to go down there and audition and get on the radio. So how old are you when you're going down there and auditioning and getting a chance to be on the shows?
I think I was about 13.
Wow, were you playing guitar at that point as well?
Yeah. Not very well, but yeah.
Who was teaching you how to play and sing? Is just a pretty natural thing?
Well, I kind of learned from friends. That some friends that had maybe played a little bit. I'd learn a chord here and there, so I ended up doing that. And then later, of course, I learned a little bit more through I worked with a band and stuff like that, and I learned to play rhythm guitar. So
Do you remember any of the local acts from those days that would have been on those radio shows that were more popular?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like even now to this day, we're still, a lot of us are still friends, Some, of course, have passed away because we're all older, but Jimmy Arthur Orge was one that was a Grammy winner. Not a Grammy. What was that?
I think he won a Juno.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or was that? Anyway, he won that a couple of times way back in the day. And, he worked all across Canada. He worked in the States a little bit. And very good guy, a very good musician, singer. And let's see, who else? Well, the Rogers Brothers Band, I worked with those guys. That was probably the first band I worked with. And I worked with them for about 4 or 5 years.
When did you get the job with them?
1959.
Wow, so you're still quite young at the time.
Well, I think it was 18, 19, maybe by then.
Okay. And they were on these radio shows as well?
They were actually the staff band on that show.
Oh, okay.
And so we went, every week as a kid, and then I started playing for dances, and we would do a little show and then a dance to follow, type of thing, every weekend.
Oh,
there was no music in the bars or nothing like that in those days,
Just like halls and radio.
Yeah, halls and yeah.
Was that the Jubilee Jamboree?
Yes, that was it.
That was
found
the
that.
show. Yeah, I saw the Jubilee Jamboree, the Noon Show, and the Chuck Wagon Show are all shows that you appeared to do in those days. And some of them were TV shows, or were they all radio?
Well, the Chuck Wagon and was a TV show.
Okay.
And the Noon Show was a TV show. And I also did Spotlight. It was a local TV show.
So were those really sort of effective in getting you like a bit of a bigger audience when you were playing the hall shows, or were you just the singer in the Rogers Brothers Band at that point?
Well, no. Like I was getting hired as a singer, going to these different events, And most of the time, I worked with them as a singer in the band. But when on these shows, the Spotlight had their own band that they had set up for that particular show, and they'd get different artists. They were getting name people coming in. I think Emmylou Harris did one, and people like that, coming in as guest artists. And then they would get a local person like me maybe to do it as well.
So you get the gig with the Rogers Brothers in the late 50s, and are they traveling around Alberta at that time? They
were, yes. Living here and traveling around. So we did, like I say, little concerts, maybe an hour and a half concert, and then a dance later on the weekends, Friday and Saturday. And we'd go out all over the country around this area,
Are you holding a job in those days too, or are you just gigging on the weekends?
No, music was my thing, and that's what I wanted to do. We didn't make a lot of money. Good thing I could live at home.
Yeah, for sure. But they seem to have a lot of traction. I've read that the Rogers Brothers did shows with like real legends like Ray Price, Farron Young, Wilf Carter, Hank Snow, and George Jones. It's like a pretty incredible list. Were you in the band playing shows with these fellas?
I did most of those shows. We did like opening acts for those people.
And they'd be coming in with their own band or with the Rogers Brothers?
Yeah, with their own.
Okay.
Yeah, with their own band usually, and we'd do a little local thing at the beginning, just like an opening act, kind of,
In the same kind of halls and stuff like that.
It would be big, like arenas and stuff like that.
Oh wow, so big audiences.
Yeah, big audiences. And we did the Edmonton Garden several times, and that was the big, the place venue in those days.
How many people in there, do you think?
I think they seated probably between 500 and 5,500, I think.
And there was an appetite for country music in that region in those days. Those stars would have been selling those shows out?
Oh, they were sold out. I remember the biggest show I ever saw there was the Johnny Cash show. And I'm sure they were just hanging off the rafters. It was so packed. And I don't think there was any fire, deals like where you had to have just so many people in those days.
What year was that, the Johnny Cash show?
Probably the late 50s, early 60s. But I just don't remember the year.
So was it the Rogers Brother gig that led to your meeting with Webb Pierce?
No, I was hired by a local promoter here. He'd brought in him and Curly Gerlach. Curly was a disc jockey at CJCA. So him and Curly would bring in all these Opry shows. And so Benny called me one day and said, I got Webb Pierce coming to Alberta to do 3 or 4 shows. You want to do some you want to sing with them? So I said, yeah, of course, and so I had met him when I was about 16 years old, but I can tell you that in a minute. But that time, when I was 16, Webb was in town also on an Opry show, and our local group had a little event after, a little party, and all the Opry people came. And so everybody was singing and playing and just having fun. And so our local promoter said, you should listen to this girl. And he said, I think she has a lot of potential, to Webb. So he did, but he said, she does, but she's only 16, too young, really to go to Nashville now. But then later is when I went to Nashville.
He came back to town to do some shows, and you connected with him a few years later?
Yeah. But the year that we connected was the tour I was talking about. We did 4 or 5 smaller areas, not real small towns, but arenas. Mm-hmm. And Webb was the headliner, of course, and I was with the Rogers Brothers then at that time. And we did our show, and then he came out to do his part, and he was about halfway through, and he said, I'm going to bring Joyce out here again to do a song on my portion. Oh. I thought, what the heck, Anyway, I go, what's going on? And he said, yeah, just do a tune, do whatever. So I said, okay, jambalaya, the guys know that. And so I did that, and I did the song, and I got a pretty good hand. And he said, I've known this girl now for a while, and he said, I'm pretty impressed with her work ethics and her da-da-da-da, And he said, I'm going to arrange for her to go to Nashville and do some recording. Well, I was just floored,
Yeah.
Anyway, we ended up going back to the producer's house in Edmonton after that show, and he got on the phone, woke Owen Bradley up in the middle of the night in Nashville.
Wow.
And said, I got this girl, and I really want to get her a record deal. And so he said, if you think she's good enough, then just go ahead with it, and we'll figure it out, So I thought, this is never going to happen. Because, you get, when I was singing all those years before that, I did Opry shows, and, Opry stars would say, oh, yeah, I can help you, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
But it never happened. And, you think that way. So anyway, he phoned he phoned Owen, and so I went home, and I was home for about maybe just 3 or 4 days. I get a call from Nashville, and it was Webb, and said, your session is set up for this week. Can you come down? I said, yeah, I'm ready, And so I did. My parents paid my way, the airplane fare and all that, and I went down, and we picked out songs, and Webb was in partnership with Jim Denny, who was a very influential guy at that time in Nashville. And he was, Jim Denny owned the Jim Denny Artists Bureau and Cedarwood Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, he said, we got this set up, so we'll pick the songs. And we did that. Leave It On Your Mind was one of them. And we were picking songs in one of the studios downstairs. And we had a bunch of demos to listen to. And finally, Wayne Walker walked in the room, and he said, I got a tune. And I wrote it quite a long time ago, but I just have never put it on a demo. But I can sing it for you. So he did, and we were standing there listening, and Webb said, that's the one. We got to have that one.
Wow,
and
so that's the first time you heard it. He sang it for you. Wayne Walker sang it for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Webb was very good at finding tunes. He seemed to be able to pick hit tunes for some reason, And so that's what we did. And then there was the other side of that record was Hiding Out, which was written by Webb and Teddy Wilburn of the Wilburn Brothers.
Right. Yeah, it's cool. You can still find those original recordings. I mean, obviously, you went on to re-record that, I'm sure, years later as well, right?
Yeah.
So when you got down to Nashville, was that the place that you always wanted to go? And, you've been promised the chance before, and it didn't pan out, and now you're finally there. Were you excited? Were you intimidated? What was that whole range of emotion?
I find that I'm more nervous and intimidated by things as I get older than I was at that age. I was 21, I think, when I went to Nashville that year. maybe 20. I can't remember, 21, I think. And I was just so excited. This is a lifelong dream,
Yeah.
And I was so excited to be there. And yeah, I wasn't nervous. I just, let's do it.
Just felt like you were finally where you should be.
Well, I didn't think that way then. I don't think. I'm beside myself because I was so happy to be there.
Must have been so exciting. And after Wayne Walker sings "Leaving on Your Mind" to you, do you immediately like the song? Or are you like, I can sing this?
I like the song, yeah.
Yeah.
But the funny part is, after I heard the playback, I don't know. You're a singer, I know. I've read that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I hear myself back, it doesn't sound great to me.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah, it sounds better in the moment sometimes.
Well, you know what? The people I've talked to, most artists I've talked to, Kitty Wells, one for instance, says, I hate listening to myself. And I've talked to several that have said that, and I'm that way, because I thought, am I the only one that thinks this?
Had you had much recording studio experience though before you arrived in Nashville?
We had a couple of records out of Edmonton here. We used a CKUA radio studio, and because they had all the equipment and all the gear at that time,
Right.
And I had recorded for Point Records and Rodeo Records. They're all were Canadian companies, and so that's how we got on record to start with.
Was that the Rogers Brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys. And those are regional releases that are getting radio play within Alberta. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Owen Bradley, such a gigantic name in country music and Decca Records, and was he hands on during the sessions down there?
Oh yeah, he was right there. He said, "You're doing the Opry Saturday night." Just bang. It was done.
Wow.
And and so I did, and I had 3 standing ovations. Called me back, and he was really impressed. He said, "I would like to manage you, Joyce." So I said, "Oh God." It was such an surreal thing, the whole week there. And but anyway, I ended up signing a 5-year contract with him, and I had 3 single releases out of Decca at that time. And during that time, and then Jim, the last record I did, shortly after that, Jim got sick with cancer and passed away very quickly. And so he was a big push in my career. I was so lucky to meet that man. But Webb got all that started. Him and Jim were partners, And so I just have to, I'm so thankful to them, for what they did. But when what do? You're down there by yourself and you don't know really anybody. Where do you go, to try to get advice or whatever,
Well, yeah. It must be a little bit overwhelming and
it was.
Yeah. So you're on the Opry before the singles even released?
Oh yeah.
Wow. So
the same weekend that we recorded, I was on the Opry.
Do you remember much about the actual session, any of the musicians that were there, or how long it took to pump that out?
Oh, we had such a great. Well, they were the crew that everybody used in Nashville in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Ayers sang backup. Owen Bradley's brother Harold played bass. Floyd Kramer on piano. Pick Robbins on piano. So we had 2 piano players on that.
Mm-hmm.
Harold Bradley, let's see, Buddy Harmon on drums. Grady Martin played guitar. Wow. Bobby Moore on bass.
Holy.
Billy Kramer played guitar as well. 4 violin players for the Nashville Symphony.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the cream of the crop. You couldn't get any better.
Yeah, Owen's crew was the best, it seems.
And where we recorded was Columbia Studios, which was the old Bradley's barn.
Right. Wow. So that must have been. Yeah. And so you had obviously known those musicians' names and their playing from the records.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Were you intimidated again there, or was it
I didn't really. I was nervous because I wanted to be good. You want to do the best you can.
Sure.
And I was nervous that way, but I guess we got through it.
You guys just did you record live off the floor? Like, are the Jordanaires
live
right
off
there?
the floor? And we maybe did it. We actually did two run-throughs, and the third was the session. That was the record.
You just know it's the one.
Them guys, they're so good.
Those are the best. I've got goosebumps just talking about these guys and the sounds of those records. Like, I love the way that sounds. And in the headphones, there's a mono mix of your version of the song, and I've listened to it a few times.
Oh, do you?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
I just love country music and that era in particular. You know, everyone is really playing for the song, and to think that they can do it so quickly and so efficiently is amazing.
And they were all so great, so nice, and so helpful. And you know, one of the Jordanaires said, "Joyce, just sing it like you sing it. We'll follow you." You know, it's like, holy cow!
Yeah, and they were all gentlemen, and Webb Pierce and Owen Bradley.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You know what? You hear of a young girl going to Nashville and getting these guys after her. I never ever had that ever there. They were always very respectful.
That's so nice to hear.
I met their wives and their families, and it's Webb was just a total gentleman, and so was Jim. But I was probably around Webb more than Jim.
Were you in Nashville for some time after the session and after the recording?
We were there. I was only there a week at that time, and then in 1964, my husband and I went back, and we spent a little time around there. And we tried to get something going, because it was just after my last record that Jim passed, and I wanted to, see what I could find out, if we could get something else going,
Right.
But there was, if you have to live there, you have to be there. You have to be a part of that scene.
Hey there again, folks. As we approach the halfway point of today's episode, I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. You're listening to the Northern Report podcast. I'm your host, Sean Burns, and our guest today is Joyce Smith. I'll remind you to follow along with the Northern Report podcast and our playlist on Spotify. You can subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, listen on YouTube, our Anchor.fm home base, or wherever you find your podcasts. During Joyce's whirlwind week in Nashville, she was fortunate enough to sing on the Opry stage and record a timeless and beautiful song with some of the biggest names in the history of country music. Now, Leave It On Your Mind may be widely regarded as a Patsy Cline song, and though there's no doubt Patsy's place at the very front of the line in terms of American music and singers, I'll implore you to go find Joyce's recording of the song. Her voice cuts, every note and every phrase coming straight from the heart and entirely believable to the listener. To be able to convey this emotion at such a young age, while perhaps not yet having directly experienced such romantic hurt, speaks volumes about Joyce's ability as an interpreter of song. We'll hop back in and find Joyce on the cusp of releasing what became her signature song, gigging at Panther Hall in Fort Worth, and her return north of the border. Yeah, forget about you pretty quick if you're not right there reminding them who you are. But I mean, the single goes on to sell in excess of 100,000 copies. It's a radio hit in the USA. Were you surprised by its success?
Yeah, I was. Because when I heard the record, I thought, oh, God, I didn't sing that very good,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when when they played it, I couldn't play it for anybody here till it was actually released. Decca told me not to play it for anyone till it was released. So, I listened to that thing when I got home so many times. I'm like, oh, God, that's not very good, Mm-hmm. And then when they started playing on the radio, and it started becoming like everybody wanted it, and just unreal.
It seems very, very common to me in all the country music research that I've done. It's not uncommon. In fact, it is common that some of these songs are recorded by multiple artists multiple times within the same year. The story goes, not long after your single comes out, Patsy Cline hears the song, convinces Owen to let her record it. What's your reaction, and how do you feel about Patsy doing the song shortly after you did?
The week I recorded it, I went back into Owen's office because I was leaving, like maybe the next day. I can't just remember. But anyway, he said, "Oh, Patsy was in here yesterday. I played your record for her." And my heart dropped. Mm-hmm. And he said she wanted to record it immediately. She loved the tune. And he said, I just looked at her and I said, "No, Patsy, this girl, I'm going to wait and see what she can do with this record." And he did. He waited for a year.
Just gave it a good chance.
So yeah, like he gave it a good chance, and it did well.
Yeah,
and I don't know how many it actually sold because I got that from Decca. They send out all these things telling you where the record's playing and how many sold and da da da. And I got that probably in the mid '60s from them. So I mean, it could have done way better than that, as far as I know.
Right. Yeah.
But at that point, he said, Owen said, not Owen, Jim Denny said, "You have a hit seller here, a hit song here," and like they know, I guess,
Yeah, but I mean, so how did you feel about Patsy doing it?
Actually, I was, in a way, I was disappointed, but in another way, I was thrilled because she liked my record.
Yeah, and she must have been one of your favorites, I would assume.
Oh, she was one of my favorites, and I met her when I was a very young girl. She had come up to Edmonton on an Opry show, and my sister, I wasn't driving, I wasn't old enough to drive, I was about 14, 15,
mm-hmm.
And so, but she was with a bunch, Jim, what's his name? A bunch of different Opry guys, anyway, and we were talking, and she gave me an LP, signed it for me. And she found out from people there that I was a singer, and she encouraged me to do it that's what I wanted to do. And my sister and I talked to her for quite a long time, and ended up driving her back to her hotel.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had quite a long chat with her, and she was quite a lady.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't swear I was a kid,
mm-hmm.
but she could cuss like a pretty good.
Well, it's all those years in country music.
Well, sure. She had, she'd been on the road for a long time by then.
Yeah, they're probably working them really hard in those days as far as that goes.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah. And, you had to be tough, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think you still do, but I think back then it would have been much more difficult to be on the road and the demands of getting you out so often. So were you sent out to tour behind the single after it came out?
Not from down there. I came home and was waiting to see, what things did. I never did go back there to work.
Oh.
Which is a shame. I should have just moved there,
Yeah.
But hindsight's 20/20, right?
But you got to do the Opry one time, or was there another?
One time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that? I mean, that must have been a thrill. Like, what can you tell me about that?
It was. Well, here I am standing in the same spot that all these famous people stood at. Even, just everybody, every artist in country music that was a star stood in that same spot I stood at that night.
And do you remember who else was on the show that evening?
Hank Snow was on it. I don't remember really. I was so excited.
I bet. Yeah.
Mind you, that's how many years ago now?
60 years ago?
Yeah.
So I read somewhere that you did, I don't know if it was one show or a string of shows at Panther Hall in Fort Worth.
George, my husband is a rodeo cowboy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So him and I, he worked a lot of rodeos in the U.S. in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to the States, and he was working rodeos, and we ended up in Fort Worth at the rodeo, and a bunch of us said, let's go out and find some country music. So we found this club called Panther Hall, and they said it was pretty new and pretty nice place to go. And so we ended up going there, a bunch of us, and it was a Wednesday night. They didn't have anything going on in the main room, but upstairs they had a little like a hootenanny bar, they called it, and anybody could go in there and get up and sing with the local band there.
Wow.
So we're listening, and some of the music was really good. And anyway, the Cowboys, Joyce, you got to get up there, and they're hollering, "Get Joyce up there!" And it ended up I got up and sang, and I did quite a few tunes. I was like, they wanted me to stay up there, and after we were finished, the owner came over. His name was Corky Kirkendall.
What a name!
And and he said, "What are you doing? Like, are you staying around Fort Worth?" And I said, "Well, we're rodeoing, and George goes from city to city, we don't really have plans except to rodeo, And anyway, he said, "Well, would you be interested in singing here?" I said, "Yeah." So anyway, they had a 6 or 7 piece band there, and their name was Pat Grogan and the Cowtowners. And anyway, they hired me. So George and I got a little apartment, and we stayed there for about 6 months. But you see, I'm a dual citizen with the U.S., but I didn't get this until just in the last 15 years.
Okay.
I didn't know I could get it until the last 15 years, put it that way. My dad was American, okay? So anyway, we ended up staying there, and we didn't have our papers to work there. And they were paying me under the table, which was okay, but I got a little nervous,
Yeah.
About that, because I didn't want to be kicked out of the country. But anyway, we ended up coming home. We were there from January till, I think, the end of June.
And you're playing 6 nights a week at Panther Hall?
No, we played Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that room? I mean, it's one of my favorite records is Charlie Pride at Panther Hall. As far as a live record goes, it's fantastic. So was it a big room that you were singing in?
It held about 2,000 people.
Dance hall style, Texas country music.
Yeah, Texas dance hall style, yeah.
Oh, wow, that must have been... And
George tells me 3,000 now. Okay,
wow.
For 3,000. Yeah, it was built for a tournament for a bowling league and tournaments, and then they turned it into a nightclub.
Really?
And it was called Panther Hall. I could send you some stuff if you want.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
I got a couple of old pictures of me on stage. It's got Panther Hall across the top.
Oh, please.
And
yeah.
And I worked with the local band there. And they were good. Pat Grogan and the Cowtowners had really good musicians. And it was his band, but Corky ended up wanting me to be promoted as Joyce Smith and the Cowtowners. I felt kind of out of place in that situation, but they did that, Joyce Smith and the Cowtowners, with Pat Grogan. It was kind of unfair to Pat because he's a really good guy.
Yeah.
But
did you guys return to Canada after that stint there then?
We came back home, and we were going to go back to the States because I was going to get my papers and go back. And then it ended up the local station here that I worked lots for before, CFCW, did a lot of promos and rodeos and, remote control things. And so they hired us for the whole summer. Oh. So we stayed home and worked the whole summer taking our bands and going around doing rodeos and playing rodeo background music and playing afternoon in the fair, like behind the rodeo stands and all that,
This is the 60s?
Yeah.
In the 1960s?
Yeah, this would be, I'm thinking 65. We came home in 64 from Panther Hall, or from Texas. So it'd be 64, 65, yeah.
So this is kind of at the time when, I guess, in the years to come, the 6-nighter sort of circuit starts to happen. Did you find yourself entangled in that world eventually? Eventually,
but we didn't. We found the bars opened. I'm trying to think, in 1965 or 66, to 6 nights a week musicians could play.
Right.
And then we started working every night.
And are you still staying sort of regional near Edmonton, or are you
We stayed right in Edmonton then for the longest time because we ended up having 2 kids and staying home and doing that, and so we had work locally, right in town. And then we branched out because we wanted to get out and do different things. So we started going on the road a little bit more as the kids got older, and we played like Calgary, Ranchmans, Saskatoon, Barkay, different places like that. Probably all those places too.
My parents met at the Barkay.
Oh, you're kidding.
My father was a picker, and my parents met there, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
What's your dad's name?
His name was Mike Burns, and at the time he was playing with a fella named Joe Firth.
I know Joe.
Yeah. So I grew up out in Ontario. I'm in Winnipeg now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So and I'm still in touch with some of those guys, with Paul and Mike Weber that were with Joe. And
yeah,
so
I know all those guys.
I bet you do, yeah.
Playing those gigs, we all cross paths as you load in and load out,
Yeah, I mean, that must have been tough. You had children and you're out there doing 6 nights a week.
It was.
How did you do that? How did you maintain that life?
My mom would come over and stay while we were on the road for a week or two, and then thank God for your family,
Then you come home and work locally for a little while, 6 nights a week, right?
Yeah. But most of the time, sometimes we were gone 3-4 weeks at a time, traveling, doing 6-nighters,
How far away from Edmonton would you guys get?
Well, we did, we worked in Saskatchewan and BC a little bit, mostly Alberta.
With the Rodeo Wind Band?
Yeah.
And did you get to, I mean, there's so much work. I know people were coming in and out of bands a lot, but were you able to maintain a sort of steady group of players for a while in that group? We had
a lot of really good players, but as you know, they come and go.
Yeah.
But we had, basically we had I can just tell you who we had. We had Myron Shot on fiddle, who worked with, Myron?
Yeah, he worked with Ian Tyson a bunch too, right?
Yeah. And Monty Paul on drums at that time for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Anderson played guitar for a long time with us, who worked with Sklar after, Brian Sklar.
Right.
And Red Volkart played guitar for us for 2 or 3 years.
Oh, I bet he did.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah.
Ken Neer on steel, who was from Toronto. Who else did we have? I think here. My husband on bass.
Oh, I didn't know he was in the band. That's cool.
Yeah, he plays bass.
There you go.
And he run the band. I mean, he looked after all that stuff.
Did any of those guys, I guess other than Red, go on to solo careers of their own or fronting their own bands?
Well, like Myron does solo stuff,
mm-hmm.
And we're all still real close friends. I talk to Red often.
He's quite a guy.
He's a great guy. To be on the road with a guy like that, he's so fun.
I bet
and plays so good, and he's so into the music. Well, all those guys are. I think if they're professional people, and this is what they want to do, and this is their passion, they're all great.
Was it evident that Red was the one of the better players in the region in those days already?
Well, the funny part was about that is he came to play a gig with Dick Dameron in Leduc, which is just a little suburb here.
Mm-hmm.
And George and I went out to visit with Dick because we're old buddies, very close friends. And so we went out to listen to Dick, and Red was playing for him. He'd come in out from BC, I guess, and Dick hired him for that gig. And anyway, we're listening. I said, holy cow, can that old guy ever play?
He's like 25.
He was 19.
Oh, even better.
I mean, he looked 45. I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
And I said to George, holy cow, can that old guy ever play? So they took a break, and they came over and sat with us and talked. And finally, we said to Red, are you going to be around, Are you playing locally or anything? Yeah, just gigging, He didn't have anything steady with Dick,
Mm-hmm.
And Dick didn't play every week, And so it ended up we connected, and he came to work with us.
And you stayed in touch with a lot of these fellows throughout the years?
Oh yeah, we went to Texas, and I don't remember what year. Yeah, he was in. Where was Red when we went to visit? Not Austin. Yeah, whatever. It's in the area.
And I saw a good sample of videos from the Number One West TV show. That was Sklar's show, right?
Yeah, right.
And that would have been, I mean, late 80s that all these videos of you are on there. So you were going at it pretty hard through the 70s and 80s, like consistently still and recording.
Oh yeah, I've never stopped. You know, I started playing like early, real young, and I got with the band when I was 18, 19, and I really have never stopped playing. You know,
over 60 years.
Yeah. Up till like this last few years, we have a group called the Canadian Country Music Legends. My husband and I started it about 20 years ago, in 2000 actually, as a Millennium Project. Mm-hmm. And we hired the best people we could hire that would attract the older people doing classic country.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we got Jimmy Orge, Bev Monroe from CSCW, many others. And then we ended up bringing in a guest artist. We brought Marie Petrel, several different artists. Mostly we tried to use Canadian artists, but we did use a couple of American artists. We used Loa Lucille Starr was our guest several times. Myrna Laurie. Claude Gray came up a couple times, or once, I guess, and did a couple of shows with us here. But probably, just a few Americans. You know, we tried to keep it Canadian because we were the Canadian Country Music Legends.
Right.
And we tried to keep it that way, you know.
The Six Nighters sort of started to dry up in the early to mid 90s. Were you still at it at that point?
Yeah, we're still playing, you know, we're working, you know, pretty regular.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then the Canadian Country Music Legends organization and show. And I guess it's a way to, you know, preserve the sounds and the music and give people, you know, a memory of the music that they fell in love with. Can you tell me what kind of shows you guys are playing? You know, like you're playing in theaters and halls still, or how does that work?
No, we played mostly theaters, like soft theaters.
Right.
And really nice venues, you know. And we were selling out everywhere because, you know, there's people out there craving to hear this kind of music, which they don't hear hardly ever on radio and that type of thing, you know? And, so, I mean, we were very successful with that show up until the pandemic.
Are you, I mean, as things sort of started, you know, kind of seem like they're headed in the right direction, will there be plans to resume those shows in the future, you think?
Oh, I think there will be, but, you know, we're all getting older.
Yeah.
As far as us, the musicians and stuff. But, yeah, I think we'll be doing some things, you know. I don't know when we're going to open for that. Like, we're opened a bit here now, but, like, a theater, you can only have 150 people. Well, that wouldn't even cover the rent and the, you know, of a venue.
When you're putting a show
and that
on.
type of stuff. Yeah. So we can't do that yet, but hopefully they'll open it. And they're talking about opening right up.
Oh.
So hopefully, we don't have any dates or anything yet, but hopefully it will be soon.
Well, I mean, it's great. It's great that you've got all these records. I mean, you recorded for a number of labels. There's lots of Joyce Smith music out there in the world.
Yeah. I appreciate, you know, everything that I've got and people like you, you know, that are interested.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've had just a wonderful life in music, and I know a well-deserved honor of being inducted into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame. And I really want to thank you very much for taking a few minutes here to tell me some of your story. I really appreciate it.
You betcha.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Well, friends, I hope that you've enjoyed my chat with Joyce Smith, and a sincere thank you to her for taking the time to share her story with us. A number of re-recorded cuts from Joyce's catalog are available wherever you're streaming music for a nominal monthly fee, or dig in on YouTube, where there is tons of live videos to chew on, as well as Joyce's recordings from the Decca label in the early 1960s. That's episode 20 of the podcast here today, friends, and I'd just like to let you know that I'll be taking the month of August off of the pod, and I'll be back in September with some fresh, exciting episodes. In the meantime, follow, subscribe, like, share, and leave us a rating if you would. I sure do appreciate all the folks who have taken the time to do so already. Our logo was created by Boots Graham of Boots and the Hoots, Central Alberta's finest honky-tonkers. Music on the show today is courtesy of Sean Burns and Lost Country, The Divorcees, and Skinny Dick. From local legends to regional stars to the cream of the Canadian crop, You'll find it all here on the Northern Report. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll chat later.
Hey.
Hey, pal, what do you got for me?
Step right up. Come on in.